Hello, everyone, and welcome to the preview show delivered by FedEx. I'm your host, Jonathan Merryman, here with Marty Snider of NBC Sports, filling in for Chris Rice. Today, it's all about Kentucky, but first, let's talk about Daytona, man. What a wild race. Erik Jones gets his first win of the year. Pure excitement out of that kid afterwards.
Yeah, it was great to see him be so excited to be able to get that first career win at Daytona, and certainly I was a little bit surprised Erik Jones was the one who got out in front at the very end of the race. But what a wreck-filled race that was. And to me, that just shows the desperation these teams have right now, trying to get that win, doing anything it takes to be able to get that win. But yeah, he certainly had to miss the wrecks for Erik Jones. But yes, a young man who's been ready to win that first race. We've seen him run well at a lot of racetracks, so very happy to see him get that win.
Now, last year, starting at Daytona, he went on a streak of top 10 finishes, 8 top 10s in 10 races, Daytona through Richmond. So is he peaking at the right time? It seems to be his little hot streak here coming up.
Well, I think for Erik last year, that was certainly an example of him learning the tracks a little bit better, and I think we'll see that again this year with that race team. You know, it's funny, when I talked to him before Daytona, he said, maybe Daytona we could win, but he really mentioned Michigan and Bristol, 2 racetracks coming up that he felt like they could go and they could win those races. He's obviously very good at Michigan. That's his home racetrack. But Bristol is where he's been fantastic. He almost won the night race at Bristol last year, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them win again in the regular season. But they're certainly going to be a factor even in the playoffs if you think about it, because, Jonathan, they're still with Joe Gibbs Racing, right? And Joe Gibbs Racing is very strong at almost every racetrack. So I think Erik Jones is going to be someone you're going to have to think about who could win not only in the regular season but also the playoffs.
All right, before we shift gears to Kentucky, let's touch on Ricky Stenhouse Jr. A lot of controversy surrounding him, but we were talking a little bit before the show started, and we don't think that Ricky's at fault for as much. Yes, he was aggressive driving. He needs to be. But did he really cause everything that happened at Daytona?
Well, I think that first wreck you can lay a little bit on William Byron, and obviously Brad Keselowski said, hey, I should have just moved William Byron when he put that block on me, but Stenhouse was obviously in the wrong place there. But there's no doubt Ricky Stenhouse was very aggressive in the Daytona race. And yes, the Kyle Busch wreck was his fault. You know, you could say, I just got a little bit tight, but he said, no, I was trying to side draft Kyle Busch and kind of got out of control there. So I think, again, that goes back to the original point I made. It shows the desperation for these teams. He talked about that in his post-race comments. We needed to come here, and we needed to win, and we needed to get those points. And so now with 7 winners, because now you've added Erik Jones to that mix, we're going to see that desperation for these final 8 regular season races, because these guys have to get a win in order to get those playoff points, in order to be able to run and be able to advance in the playoffs as well.
You mentioned Kyle Busch. You mentioned Brad Keselowski. Both of those guys super good at Kentucky.
Yeah.
What makes them so good there, and can Brad lock himself in?
Well, I think when you talk to everyone about Kentucky, they're all going to mention turn 3, because that's the most difficult turn in all of NASCAR, according to Brad Keselowski. Turns 1 and 2, since the repave, wide open. They're fairly easy, but turn 3 is such a tough entry, and we see so many wrecks entering turn 3. I think that's going to be the problem spot this weekend, and that's what makes that racetrack so difficult and such a challenge for these drivers. And yes, it is going to be a fun night race, and it's always fun when you're racing at night. So I think we're going to see a lot of sparks fly this weekend. We saw plenty last week at Daytona. We're going to see more at Kentucky.
Who else do you have your eye on? I think back to last year, and Bubba Wallace really sparked a lot of interest at that race. So can a guy like him get up to the front?
You never know if a guy like that can get up front, but who I have my eye on this weekend is Kyle Larson. I think he's so good at these 1.5 mile racetracks and still doesn't have that first ever win. I think it could come this weekend, but I think obviously the Gibbs cars, you're going to see the big 3 be very strong as well. To me, the big topic is who else can get up there with those big 3 and knock on the door. We've seen Kyle Larson do it. We've seen Clint Boyer do it. I think one of those 2 guys can get up there and challenge those guys. But I think, to me, it's very difficult to knock off those top 3. They just kind of have that speed. They have that momentum. And even a guy like Brad Keselowski, we talked about a minute ago. I talked to Paul Wolf about this. He said, we bought our best stuff to Chicago, and we could only finish 9th. That's the best we could do. So I think right now even Team Penske is a little step behind those top 3 or 4 guys.
All right, now we got to put our money where our mouth is. Who you picking to win Kentucky?
I'm going to go with Kyle Larson this week, and I think he finally gets that first 1.5 mile win. I think Kyle's been knocking on the door for that. I think this is a racetrack that really benefits him. So I'm going to go with Kyle Larson this weekend at Kentucky.
All right, I'm going to take Kevin Harvick. Really want to pick Brad Keselowski, but you talked me out of it with those stats the last time. I think Kevin Harvick goes out, gets win number 6. 6 this weekend, but now where you can see if our predictions are right this Saturday night, the Quaker State 400, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on NBCSN. Marty, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next week as we head to New Hampshire.